Zane, I'd love to hear from you and what are you currently working on? And tell us a little bit about that.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a developer advocate at CircleCI, which means I get to do a whole lot of things. My main job is essentially to work with external developer communities that means not communities that are kind of with our company already or people inside of our company, but you folks and every other kind of developer out there, and kind of sharing the insights and knowledge from my company, CircleCI, with those communities, bringing back feedback, essentially acting as this sort of interface between external and internal. So essentially within the company, I represent the community, and within the communities, I represent the company. So it's kind of like uh, both sides of the divide, I suppose.
What is
Um,
Circle CI? Can you tell us a little bit about Circle
Good
CI?
question. Excellent question, even. So we are a CI/CD platform, the largest hosted CI/CD platform in the world. That means we enable developers um, go from kind of source code to build applications with as little hassle, with as little effort, and with as much automation as possible. Essentially, our tool takes the source code on one side and builds that, runs your tests, does a bunch of other things that you might want to do, which I'll be showing you in my kind of practical part of the workshop, and then kind of takes it all the way to deploying the software, running this wherever you might want to run it. And that's like everything from like a Heroku application or something running on Kubernetes, or even an Android application deployed to the Play Store.
Awesome. Yeah, Circle CI is a pretty big name. So hopefully everybody here already is familiar with Circle CI and and can ask more questions to Zane about other things. But Zane, I'd actually love to learn more about how you I know everyone wants to get to the workshop, but I really want to just ask a couple of questions to Zane about like your own journey as a developer and how you like how did you get into this role and what was the first thing that you did, what background do you have, like do you have a comp sci background, do you have a non-traditional background?
So yeah, I have a pretty boring tech background, I suppose. Like I've started off as a developer, went to university studying informatics. Um, that was yeah, a long time ago now. Uh, and essentially, like just out of the back of my studies, I was always interested in just kind of building things and just kind of experimenting. So me and a couple of my colleagues from university essentially started attending these kind of hackathons contests, and one of them was essentially a Microsoft Imagine Cup, which is like a
Cool.
big Microsoft student competition, which in that year the finals happened in New York. We were kind of chosen. I'm originally from Slovenia, by the way, so just for a bit of context, we went to New York, present that, and went back, and then started a company on the top of on the back of that, essentially. And so it was always kind of entrepreneurial, hackerish attitudes to things from my end.
Did you just say you started your own company based on a hackathon project?
Uh, yeah, kind of. It was a contest, not like a 24-hour hackathon. It was like more of a few months of hacking, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool.
Um, yeah. So that was how I got into like proper developer jobs, which weren't really proper because I was kind of doing half of the company stuff as well. And then I moved to London, where I live now, and I started working at more kind of in more developery focused roles, like in a team working as a mobile developer.
Mm.
Um, After a couple of more companies, I ended up at a place that was a developer tools company, and that's where we kind of I started playing with the idea of doing developer relations as a career, or as a job, as opposed to being a full-time developer. And basically a bunch of stuff kind of had to happen or clicked with me to kind of do that leap. First one was, obviously, I enjoyed doing the variety of activities that you get to do in a if you're a startup founder, or if you're working for a very small company, because you have to do, like, one day you're basically just talking to a bunch of people, from a bunch of users to a bunch of like community members to and the other day you're basically building some applications, you're working on the product, you're kind of doing it, or you're presenting it to whoever needs to be presented it, or whoever you want to present it to. So that's kind of variety. And then back at the kind of real corporate job, I was always interested in kind of teaching and conveying the knowledge and experience that I gained as a developer. And that was kind of part of my interest in developer relations as well. And when I kind of started doing developer relations, I was also doing quite a lot of conference speaking and meetup speaking as well, just doing a bunch of stuff on software testing, software quality, just like good practices. That was kind of where my interest lay at the time. And then I obviously kind of started putting all of that together, doing developer relations full time, which means, yeah, every day is different. Someday you're basically, yeah, doing workshops, doing meetups, attending a bunch of events with the community, presenting, just getting feedback, taking it back to the company, or building demos, building SDKs. There is so many different aspects to the role, which is part of the reason why I like it. But at the core is essentially working with the community and helping folks out who are using the tech. So essentially developers.
That's awesome. And how long was it since that hackathon at Microsoft?
I have to think now. It was over a decade, I suppose.
Okay,
So a
awesome.
long time.
Awesome. All right, guys, we have somebody with over a decade of experience in software development who has had a pretty unique journey on his own, from starting his own business and really experimenting with the different roles as a developer, running this workshop today. I'm super excited about this workshop, Zane. And I'm going to have my video off and I'm going to be in chat. I'll be available and helping you manage that chat if you need me. But yeah, we're ready to rock and roll and get started with things.
Awesome. Okay, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen. Let me just move a couple of windows around. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Navi, can you fix that?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Did not realize we didn't do that. Can you try now?
I can indeed. Yes, that seems to be working. Desktop 2, you should be seeing my slides. I have a few slides. I will very quickly jump through them because you probably want to look at some code instead. So we covered my background. What I wanted to cover in this workshop is essentially what CI/CD is, the topic, the introduction, why you should be interested in it as people who are entering the world of tech, the world of development, and ultimately culminating in a demo how to build a CI/CD pipeline with CircleCI. And I can follow with questions, or you can ask questions here in chat, and I can answer them as they come in. If I am kind of too involved in speaking, Navi, please let me know and and interrupt me, and I can answer this. All right. Okay. Let's begin. CI/CD is stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. That's what the acronym stands for. I'll hit present. Are you still seeing this as I hit present? Presume so.
Yes.
Good stuff. This is not a new topic. It's been around for, well over 20 years. The first kind of open source tool, Cruise Control, was created by the good people at ThoughtWorks. If you would like to learn more about the history of CI/CD and DevOps, which is like the discipline which kind of is built around many of the practices that CI/CD involves, you can check out the brief history of DevOps series on CircleCI blog, which I will link to afterwards in Discord. So as I alluded to earlier, on one side, you usually have developers who are writing code, and that's the software delivery lifecycle. That's what we call it. Sdlc is the kind of acronym for that. You might hear that in places. You have developers writing code. You're probably familiar with GitHub, where you kind of host your repositories, where you create features, new commits, merge things, review all sorts of cool collaborative stuff that happen on the code itself. And on the other hand, on this right-hand side, you have where this software is being actually used and deployed and then used in production. So that could be everything from web application, static site being like just hosting your blog, to complicated Kubernetes clusters, APIs, all sorts of things. I'm talking about anything that could essentially runs on code or is created from code and then it is deployed somewhere. And I alluded to mobile apps as well, because ultimately that's slightly different way of building things, but still you kind of deploy it to the App Store or Play Store and then use it from there. And then in the middle, you have this great abyss of orchestration, or how I also like to call it, automation, where everything that happens from this commit side of things to kind of shipping to production can be handled by something like CircleCI, which is a CI/CD platform. And if you think about what needs to happen when you're kind of deploying and getting some source code into production, you need to build it, you need to compile it. I'm hoping you also run some tests. So you need to run some tests and make sure that it's running correctly as to what you would expect or what you want. And throw it over the bridge to the operations side of things that actually runs this and monitors this. And this is not just CircleCI, this is also a bunch of other integrations, partners that we kind of have that help us or help you developers achieve many of the similar things. We'll see a security scan done today as part of that kind of orchestration automation job. And obviously, I'll get to how this kind of happens. So we're pretty big. We're the biggest shared CI/CD platform, and we've been around for just under 10 years actually, and we have folks employed all around the world. I'm based in London, headquarters is in San Francisco, and there's like a big presence in the rest of the US, Canada, UK, Ireland, Germany, and also Japan, with some other folks kind of scattered around the world. And we're basically building 1 million builds per day, which is, it's a crazy scale if you think about what kind of applications get built or what kind of tools get built with it. Anyway, why I should care? Software is complex, and you have all the technologies I mentioned, from mobile to containers, Kubernetes, serverless, to all the new frameworks that kind of emerge all the time. So it's really hard, and actually it's impossible to know all of that as a full stack engineer. You just kind of have this idea of how everything kind of comes together, and then you just figure it out as you go along. That's basically the lie of full stack that people might be telling you. But essentially you have to have the idea of how everything is constructed, and then you kind of specialize or understand different aspects of it. But yeah, every app is different and every app is complex in its own way. So it's impossible to know the entire thing. And so all of these complexity, we kind of manage it through the use of a bunch of tools for testing, for security scan. I mentioned already, to just make sure that the apps are running and telling us when they're not running as well. So the way that we kind of want them to. And obviously, we're all remote nowadays. None of that can only be like a local piece of software running. It all needs to be accessible from everywhere and able to communicate to anywhere and anyone who might be interested. So yeah, and to tie everything together, we have to rely a lot on automation, which obviously, because everything is so complex, human error is very big, serious risk. We do kind of make errors all the time. So as offloading as much of work, especially like tedious, often replicated work to a machine is a very good idea. And doing that, we also increase this thing called reproducibility, which means that we can just kind of keep doing the same things very easily with the same state, which is one of the important things with CI/CD. And you might have heard of like software releases being these kind of big, hulking, huge endeavors where teams are up for all night because they're rolling out new pieces of software. And that still happens, but CI/CD essentially helps you to kind of untangle this and ship smaller and smaller changes into production, whether that's once per week, whether that's once per day, or multiple times per day, it depends, but it ultimately helps you do that. And because you're not running a bunch of tests on your local machine, you're saving a lot of time. There is a bunch of levels to automation, from just running some tests automated and then everything else being manual, to like just writing the code and reviewing it, everything else being done with the computer. So there is a whole lot of content in there, but it's not relevant for the purpose of this talk. But essentially, I want to cover a couple of more things beyond this kind of basics of what the core principles of CI/CD are. Like, I don't know the background. Like, if you've used CI/CD obviously before, or if you used CircleCI before, please let me know. I forgot to ask that earlier, but yeah, please do let me know. The idea is, that configuration files that configure our kind of pipeline, that's what we call a CI/CD run, are committed alongside your project sources in Git. So I'll show you that in a moment. And essentially, any team member can review and contribute to those pipelines, which means that if you're a junior developer joining a team, or if you're just joining a different team that has a different stack, different frameworks in place, they're using different technologies, you can still just look for that CI/CD config. And it's just a series of scripts where you actually see what's happening. You get the idea of what components are. Are they using Kubernetes? Are they using a serverless framework? Are they building an application for .NET and whatnot? So all of that is kind of hidden, or not hidden. It's kind of hidden in plain sight within your kind of CI/CD configuration, which is super valuable. And because everything is committed in Git, it means that it's essentially, each commit is your like a snapshot of what's kind of gone on in that state. And if a CI/CD tool has done the build, done the tests, and essentially passed everything, then you know that that commit was doing what you wanted it to do, which is great. And you can always go back to it. The language we use is YAML. I'll show that to you in a minute. Essentially, it's a configuration. It's declarative language used a lot for configurations. The other aspect is that everything is isolated and executed in their own little container. So every pipeline, every build that runs is always executed in a set of kind of clean environment. That could be a new Docker container, it could be a new virtual machine. But the idea is that you can't really say it works on my machine, I'm a developer, and I don't know whether it's going to work anywhere else, because you basically code in everything that needs to happen within that environment in order for that build to run, which kind of helps that understanding, shared understanding with everyone to what's happening. And obviously, because you run all the builds somewhere else other than your local machine, you can actually store secrets elsewhere. You can integrate also security scanning tools, which I'll show as well. And it means that software is always in a state of being deliverable, because if you have software that has passed CI, it should pass the CI at any time, really, in the future. There is no versions, or there should be no version conflicts that you might have, especially like I remember doing a lot of Ruby, and there was like Ruby conflicts. There was, I remember Python having Python version conflicts. All sorts of that is like avoidable, because you kind of say, okay, I want this version, I want this version, I want this version, and these dependencies, these libraries that I want to use. And once that is kind of committed, built, that's always going to be the case. The app works with all these versions of software, these frameworks, these libraries, these dependencies, which also allows you to like ship very small changes, that because you know that everything is shippable until you kind of say no. But you can still kind of implement manual processes that I'm going to show. Anyway, let's look at the demo. So I have a repository here, which is essentially showing a pre-configured pipeline, because in the interest of time, I don't have the time to write all that YAML by myself. And in YAML, we essentially have to rely a lot on white space, which I tend to not be very good at following. So it's better if I just show you this. Anyway, with CircleCI, you have each project that's configured on CircleCI has this kind of top level CircleCI folder. And in that folder, you have a config.yaml file, which is where everything is configured. And in this file, you have a bunch of stuff. One is version, which just tells you which what the API, the system should expect. Which kind of stanzas, which verb, which kind of keywords it should expect. The interesting things here are jobs, orbs, and workflows. And in YAML, if you're not familiar with it, you basically you kind of indent everything that's like in like a next level. So jobs has like sub items build and test, and then vulnerability scan, because they're at the same level. Actually, let me show it to you in Visual Studio Code, which is the editor that I usually use. So you see that like this is all kind of items that you can collapse that are happening one under the other. So jobs are essentially a pre-configured, predetermined set of steps that execute in a given environment. Environment can be a Docker image, a container that's based on a particular image that you tell it which one it is. It could be a virtual machine image. It could be anything really. Yeah, Visual Studio Code is, I mean, it's just the best editor in my opinion. The other thing is in a job are steps, which are essentially commands that you want this job to run in the particular order. And they can be like CircleCI specific steps. For example, checkout will tell the system to check out the code at this commit. They can be command line instructions. So these run instructions are passed a command, for example, npm run test CI, so run all the tests. Some of them are prefixed by node, and for example, this node install packages, which come from this thing, which is called orbs. So orbs are our, and this is CircleCI specific. The concepts I talked about earlier are quite kind of general of any kind of CI/CD tool and are basically the principles. And this is obviously talking about some of the things that are specific to CircleCI. Different platforms might have different way of configuring things. But yeah, orbs are essentially a way to share and reuse set of configuration. So for example, install packages comes from this node orb, which I will show you in a minute. And yeah, so as these steps kind of execute one after the other, so run my tests, and then last ones are like store test results, and store artifacts, which essentially save something for the platform to showcase on the dashboard, which I'll also show in a bit. So the config file does all the functionality of CI and CD. So yes, you code your functionality in there. The actual execution is happening on the CircleCI platform, but you essentially tell it what to do from this config file. That gets read each time you kind of commit something. Each time that happens, that gets read and executed. And then I have a couple of more jobs: vulnerability scan and one for deploy. Last thing I want to show you is workflows, which is how you essentially orchestrate all these jobs in a particular order or in essentially a workflow. So you tell it, okay, do this, do these in parallel, do these after these have completed. So for example, my node test and deploy, that's name of this workflow, has a few jobs specified. First is build and test, which I showed you earlier. So my node testing, and my vulnerability scan, which uses a third-party tool to do it. And then I have a hold for approval job, which will have me click approve when I want this to continue, and a deploy Docker, which essentially requires my hold for approval. And essentially, unless you specify that something requires another job, it's going to execute right away in parallel. So you can have a bunch of different tests, a bunch of different things happen at the same time. And then only when you want to do some other verification, some other next step, essentially, like for us, it's going to be this deploying, it will have to wait for all of these to happen. So okay, let's open my terminal and see what's actually happened, because I did. Okay, I just removed an empty line, which is good. I was worried I kind of broke something. The other part of the thing is the actual dashboard. This is located at circleci.com. What you do is you go to app and and then it asks you to log in or sign up. You use your VCS provider. So I'm going to use GitHub in my case. And because like if it was the first time you were using this, it would obviously ask you, do you want to authorize this application? But for me, it's just a login from this. And in this dashboard, you see all the pipelines, everything that has run, their status, the duration, who did what commit, for example. I can kind of click on this one and see, yeah, it will take me to a commit. But this is like a different organization on GitHub. So I'm going to look at my own organization, my own user on GitHub, and go to projects here on the left-hand side. and I see all my repos that I have, and essentially that's all the repos that I have in here are basically listed here as well. So I'm going to hit set project, which essentially has detected that I already have a config. So it's not going to really do anything. It's just going to ask me to review this configuration, and then I can do start building. And now this is the other part of CircleCI, which is the actual dashboard to see what's actually happening. I can see that my status is running, and it's related to, this particular commit. And I can go in my workflow, which is neatly illustrated for me. It's kind of create this little graph, which tells me, okay, build and test and vulnerability scan are jobs which are happening at the beginning. Then we're waiting with hold for approval before deploying to Docker. Okay, build and test has failed. And why is this so? Because I have a failing test in there. So there was a question, what kind of vulnerability check is being done? So this is, for example, just using this kind of freely available shift left SAST scan. So that's application security testing scan, which does a bunch of things that their kind of tool does. That's kind of all built into their kind of Docker image. I think it does some kind of dependency scanning, so checking whether I have any outdated things in my package JSON, maybe some other things, but essentially you can do any type of kind of security scanning that you might want to do. For example, if it's a web application, you're interested in any kind of NPM vulnerabilities, for example. And there's a bunch of like these tools that you could use. For example, I'm going to go to our developer portal, circleci.com/developer. And in this developer portal, you have essentially links to documentation. My favorite part is ORBs, which is our ORB documentation site, which is where you can see where different things what's available. For example, a good example for a security scanning tool is Snyk, SNYK, which is one of our partners essentially, which they will monitor known vulnerabilities and even ask you to fix them automatically in your GitHub project, which is pretty cool. So it basically tells you what to do, and you can just do a Snyk scan, done, and that will run on your project. I'm obviously using a different one, which is using a directly like a SAST scan tool from shift left, but I think they also have a repository. There's also all sorts of other things that you can do. For example, you could say, I want to do like a browser testing. So there is ORBs for that as well. So you can do testing. Cypress for example, is a tool for end-to-end browser tests, and you can essentially just use that tool, and that's going to work. Code coverage, all of these things are kind of just there for you to use, and you don't have to spend too much time configuring and tweaking with it. There's like ORBs for Android. There's ORBs for iOS. There is no ORB, but there's a bunch of them. Docker, Kubernetes, and so on. Okay, let's go and see if we can fix this test, because my test is telling me that it's failed, which obviously is good because it's telling me that my app is not ready to be deployed. So this will never kind of go into deployment. Okay, let's do that. Git new branch, fix test, and we're going to go into test.js, and I am going to do comment out this test, which is something you should never do. You should always kind of delete code like this, because in Git, actually, let's be good citizens and delete this code, because Git will keep the history, so you don't need to have stuff hidden. Commit, fix test, push origin. Sorry. Git push origin. What? Okay. I don't know why this happened earlier. Okay, good. So what's this happened? I've just pushed some changes to my project. Let's see what's happened on CircleCI. Boom. I'm running my tests again. And my build and test job should now pass. But you may see that I'm not showing any further steps because it's not happening. I didn't comment it out in the end because I decided to do something smart for a change. Yeah, because I'm not on actually on my main branch, and my config is actually picking that up because I have a filter for my hold for approval job that only executes on the main branch, which is how you can actually create these very elaborate pipelines with doing exactly what you actually want to do. Because I really don't want to deploy from every branch. I'm only interested in understanding whether my tests pass or not. So that's why I have a filter here. So if I go into CircleCI, if I go to GitHub again, over here, I can create a pull request. What's happened now? And basically this integrates into GitHub just so that you see whether all your kind of tests are passed. So, and that my workflow has passed. So a reviewer, if I were a reviewer, could actually see, okay, all the stuff is kind of passing or it's not passing, which is like, you don't even need to look at the CI to see that something has been successful, or it's telling you maybe you should wait because you want to wait on this to give you the result. You can merge, delete the branch, and now you can see that it's executing on main, so it's going to do the whole thing. So yeah, that's kind of an example of a pipeline which you can run. And yeah, as I mentioned, CircleCI, you can just sign up with your GitHub and start playing around with this. I will drop in the link to the GitHub project and the link to this pipeline, because it's an open source project. Anyone can actually see this. Can go to this URL, and actually let me drop this in. You should be able to see this from here. If you go to this URL that I just pasted into chat, you should be able to see what's happening on my end. And this is going to break again because I forgot to do something, but this is an approval job, for example. Especially when you're working at large companies like that are more enterprise oriented, they want often to have like these approval steps where you kind of go through a checklist. Have you run the tests? Is this going to affect any other components? Blah, 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 all sorts of stuff, which fine. I mean, that's a legit thing to ask. But essentially, this gives them a way to go in and approve something if they need to. So we're only going to proceed after I hit approve here. After which point I'm going to go into this deploy Docker step. This is a sample deployment. This is not like, sometimes you would do this yourself, but essentially my deploy Docker step is just here to illustrate what you could, for example, deploy. And this just basically creates a Docker image of the base of these this application, which really does, it just says hello from CircleCI, and deploys that to Docker Hub. But I forgot to set up a couple of things, which is Docker login and Docker password. So this is not going to build anything. And obviously it's going to tell me that it's not going to build anything. Yeah. Because I don't have those credentials. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that you can actually store kind of credentials outside of your GitHub repo, which you should never ever do. Like store them inside, just because anyone can who has access to your local version of GitHub or Git repository. So if you leave your laptop somewhere, someone takes it, they have access to it, they basically can read all your Git history for anything that they can access on that computer. So essentially, if you forget any keys in there, they can access those keys and essentially access your Amazon environment. They can access your whatever you have in that repository, essentially. So that's why you really want to hide any of that away from your repositories as much as possible. So I need to go in and set up some environment variables for myself. I went into project settings, and I can go into environment variables, hit add environment variable. And I'm going to do this on a different screen just because I don't want to reproduce this all the time. So I'm expecting Docker login, which is my Docker credentials, and I'm expecting Docker pwd. So and I need to copy that in from my password manager. Okay, and I could move that back here. Okay, so I've added my environment variables. So these are exactly the same as your local environment variables that you might have in your kind of local machine. They're just kind of only accessible from a CI/CD system. And again, this is the way CircleCI does it. A different tool might have a different way to do them, but essentially every single CI/CD will allow you to kind of specify environment variables and like secrets from within their own kind of confined environment, so that you're not leaking those. Because I've done this, I can actually hit rerun workflow from start, because I know I just fixed the environment variable, so that's gonna go really fast. I don't need to kind of create another commit to do it, because by default this only kind of triggers on commits. And yeah, that's kind of where we are. If you sign up for CircleCI, you have like a pretty generous free plan, so you don't really need to pay us anything to get started. And if your project is open source, it's like way more generous. So you basically don't have to worry about kind of running out of credits anytime soon when you're building stuff on open source. Okay, so this is here. I can approve this, and hopefully my deploy Docker is going to pass now. There's also an insights feature if you're like interested in how your builds have kind of gone over the past years or months, essentially, or actually just weeks, because the last 90 days. You have this insights tab on the side, which kind of tells you, okay, my builds have lasted for that long and they've cost me that much. And that's mainly interesting for kind of engineering managers who are looking at kind of productivity on the teams from the team's perspective. But yeah, it's pretty good to know that like how often your builds are successful, how often they're failing, how many times you're actually building something per day, which is this kind of throughput value, and how fast you can actually usually fix something when you break something. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to show you today. I think I've covered quite a lot of ground. I'd be happy to answer any more questions that you might have. Yeah, either here in the chat or in on Discord.
Guys, feel free to unmute yourself and just directly ask Zane if you have a question. And also, Zen is on our Discord server, so feel free to ask questions in the current event channel. And Zane, what's the best way to reach out to you? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Is it our Discord server?
Yeah, I mean, if you like ping me on Twitter, I'm usually like I'm there pretty much all the time. I am quite a lot of Discords, so you can add me, but I might get to you in a couple of days and not right away, even though I appear online, just because yeah, I get Discord all the time, so I kind of disable most of the notifications. Um, yeah, and you can also email me at zan@circleci.com.
Awesome. So what did you all think of that? Any questions? That was awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zan. That was very educational. Thanks very
Awesome.
much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you as well. I personally, I'm a new software developer, so for me this is pretty new. But I had an interview from a company that was working with this technology, and yeah, I found it very. It makes it pretty easy to understand from this point of view. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, if usually like if you have like a interview project, it's very easy to set something up like that on CircleCI and any other kind of CI/CD platform, and then you basically showcase I'm running some tests automatically. I know how this kind of works, so you really showcase that you understand the wider software delivery process, and not just kind of this is the code that you asked me to build, these are the lines that you asked me to deliver. So you kind of show a little bit more than they might not necessarily ask for in their brief.
In this case, more is more.
Yeah, definitely. There is another question. What's the difference between testing frameworks like Selenium and CircleCI? So Selenium is a testing framework, or it's a test runner, or like a browser automation. If I'm Selenium WebDriver, I think that's what you mean. So that will essentially run the steps that you want in a browser, and that's what you can use to like verify that your web application or website is displaying or doing what you want to do when you click on a button, when you enter a form or something like that. CircleCI can yeah, Selenium is end-to-end testing. Now I need to check. Now I need to double check myself. Selenium WebDriver, that's the one, right? Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, exactly. So you basically kind of automate things that happen in a browser. CircleCI let you build that website, deploy it somewhere, and run those kind of browser tests with Selenium. You basically tell it, okay, these are my scripts that you want to run these scripts, but also run these unit tests that are made with any kind of JavaScript testing framework, for example, Jest or Mocha or something like that. It's like it's a part of the journey, whereas CircleCI kind of automates the entire journey and then calls different components. One of these can be, yeah, like Selenium end-to-end testing or that security scan that I show you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zan. I would like to ask about the staging area. Is it going to be in AWS or in the CircleCI?
We don't host any staging environment, so it's something that you would have to kind of create yourself. Yeah, basically like deploy, provision an environment, deploy some code there, and then obviously make sure to tear it down afterwards as well, so that you don't kind of keep paying for AWS forever, basically.
Yeah.
Some tools obviously automate that a little bit, especially like for testing applications. If you have like a preview apps, some tools will do that for you, essentially deploy a preview app based on what you want it to do.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So what is the add value of CircleCI beside the simplicity over Jenkins open source?
I mean, the biggest one is obviously, yeah, Jenkins is the open source, very popular open source CI/CD tool. Because it's open source, it's like accessible to anyone, but because it's open source, you also have to kind of host it yourself. So yeah, simplicity is one that you kind of pointed out very well. The other one is essentially like, yeah, everything is managed for you, so you don't have to really worry about anything. And because of that, you basically can pick any environment that is kind of wired to there, as opposed to like having Jenkins box somewhere locally and or even having Jenkins in AWS and managing that. So that's like the main thing. And obviously you don't need to update it, so you have all the security implications that you might kind of encounter if you don't kind of update your kind of Jenkins box, because you have to kind of maintain it. So you save a lot of time and effort just on that. And obviously because it's always running the latest and kind of software.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome. Getting some nice comments. CircleCI is easy to use. Very cool.
Cool, thank you.
All right, guys, if there's no more questions, I think we're on time. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. Super excited that you were all here. And do check out other events that we're hosting this week. We have Nimrod, the CEO of daily.dev, coming in on Wednesday, and we have a new learnathon that we're hosting on Friday. It is on, I believe it's on desktop puzzles. We kind of go into the practical side of algorithms. We love advocating for game build and game design. It just gets you to think about algorithms outside of just some of these HackerRank or LeetCode exercises, and it's a great way for you to get those interview skills ready. So just wanted to say that last plug. Thank you again. Which one is that? That is on Friday. I believe there is, I know that we were having some issues with Mintbean.io platform, but you should be able to go to Eventbrite, and that one is the 83rd Learnathon happening on Friday, March 19th. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Zane, so much for coming over. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Bye, everyone.